Chapter 18 is a flood of sunshine. Arthur Dimmesdale gazes at Hester's face with a look in which hope and joy shone out, but there's also fear and a kind of horror at her boldness. She had spoken at what he had vaguely hinted at, but dared not speak. So she had suggested that Dimmesdale could just leave. And this is something we're finding out now that Dimmesdale had thought about, but had been afraid to consider actually. He thinks about how her life has freed her. She had wandered without rule or guidance in a moral wilderness as vast, as intricate, and shadowy as the untamed forest. So because she's been, alienated, she is living in a more natural way. She's free of society. Again, she's in the untamed forest, remembering that nature is representing who we are at our core, the fullness of our humanity. All of that is tied to nature. So she's been in that untamed forest amid the gloom of which they were now holding a colloquy that was to decide their fate. Her intellect and heart had their home, as it were, in desert places, where she roamed as freely as the wild Indian in his woods. It even says here the Scarlet Letter was her passport into regions where other women dared not tread. Shame, despair, and then solitude. So because she's able to just be with herself, she can think more honestly and be more authentic. These had been her teachers, stern and wild ones, and they had made her strong, but taught her much amiss. And I put a squiggly line here because that indicates that they had made her strong, but maybe taught her some things that she wasn't supposed to know, or maybe had some negative consequences. We don't have an answer to this right now. I just think it's important to notice it. The minister, on the other hand, had never gone through any experience that would lead him beyond the scope of general received laws. Like everything he has done has been, pardon the pun, but literally by the book. Though he had that one instance where he fearfully transgressed one of the most sacred of the laws, which was infidelity. But this had been a sin of passion, not of principle. So it's not like he schemed to have a relationship with Hester. It just happened. Now, nor even purpose. And I put a question mark by here. I do think there's purpose to their love, personally. I think it was genuine, and I think genuine love can have a purpose. Obviously, I think what they mean here is like he didn't have a reason necessarily to follow his heart. He didn't plan it. It was not like he was, breaking a law in order to do a higher good, just like how sometimes we think there are those few instances when it's okay to break a law. That might be what is being described here, but I do feel like there's purpose to their relationship. And because he had sinned in a passionate way, not out of a scheming way, he's even more aware of his own emotions all the time. As a man who had once sinned, but who kept his conscience all alive and painfully sensitive by the fretting of an unhealed wound, he might have been supposed safer within the line of virtue than if he had never sinned at all. So this is what Hester's been trying to tell him. Like, because you're such a good person and you're suffering for your mistakes, you are a better spiritual leader because of your own transgressions. And so this is what Hester's been trying to tell him. I want to point out here a very challenging sort of classic Nathaniel Hawthorne sentence. This is incredibly long, and a lot of times people will just become weary trying to read a long paragraph like this. But it starts with that it seemed that as regarded Hester Prynne, the whole 7 years of outlaw had been little other than a preparation for this very hour. She's got the strength needed to help him. But Arthur Dimmesdale, were such a man once more to fall, what plea could be urged in extenuation of his crime? None. So he doesn't have any strength because of the way he's been living. unless it avail him somewhat that he was broken down by long and exquisite suffering, that his mind was darkened and confused by the very remorse which harrowed it, that between fleeing as an avowed criminal and remaining as a hypocrite, conscience might find it hard to strike the balance, that it was human to avoid the peril of death and infamy and the inscrutable machinations of an enemy, that finally, to this poor pilgrim on this dreary and desert path, faint, sick, miserable, there appeared a glimpse of human affection and sympathy, a new life and a true one, in exchange for the heavy doom which he was now expiating. And be the stern and sad truth spoken, that the breach which guilt had once made into the human soul is never in this mortal state repaired. Okay, so let's just break this down. There's a lot going on here. This is sort of describing all the reasons why perhaps he would give up his suffering. Like it's just human. How much can a person handle? It's going to break you down over time to a point where perhaps you need to try to sustain yourself to live. This balance between being a hypocrite and, sort of trying to run away from your past, maybe that's difficult to balance, which makes sense. It's human to avoid death. Is that a crime to avoid death? And he's so weary and he has suffered for so long. Doesn't he deserve perhaps human affection when it's offered to him? So the sad truth spoken is that the breach which guilt has once made into the human soul is never repaired. So the point is that when you have sinned, you're never fully repaired from that sin. It's always part of who you are. Does that mean you can't be happy, that you can't find goodness in the world? And I think the argument here is no, you can find goodness in the world. That is what Hester is offering. And of course, everyone is a sinner. It's a universal experience. No one is perfect. So, this weakness, which is sin, is a human condition. And that's kind of what I'm getting as I read all of this. Let it suffice that the clergyman resolved to flee and not alone. So clearly, he has changed his mind. Hester has convinced him that it's okay to be a happy person. It's okay to have love, and that it's fine to leave this place where he feels like he's a hypocrite and he can't sort of get out from underneath his sin in the role that he has, that he should go. And he says to her, in all these past 7 years, I could recall one instant of peace or hope I would yet endure for the sake of that earnest of heaven's mercy. He's like, I always thought if I could just find mercy. But now, since I am irrevocably doomed, wherefore should I not snatch the solace allowed to the condemned culprit before his execution? He's like, I'm a sinner. I've made a terrible mistake. I am doomed anyway. Why not be happy in the meantime? Reasonable question. Or if this be the path to a better life, as Hester would persuade me, I surely give up no fairer prospect by pursuing it. Like there's nothing wrong with trying. Neither can I any longer live without her companionship. Like he wants to be with her. So tender to soothe. Oh, thou to whom I dare not lift mine eyes, wilt thou pardon me? He wants to be pardoned. He wants to be with her, and he wants to have happiness. Thou wilt go, says Hester. So it's decided. Once the decision is made, suddenly he changes. He has, for the first time ever, a feeling of genuine joy. And that's what this whole section is about. He says, I feel joy again. Methought that germ was dead in me. Hester, thou art my better angel. She has saved him. I seem to have flung myself, sick, sin-stained, and sorrow-blackened, down upon these forest leaves, to have risen up anew, with new powers. So this, again, is showing us how nature is a symbol for restoration, for humanity, for a deeper understanding of the self, for who you are as an authentic person, all these, like the truth, basically. Nature is the truth, and nature heals. Hester says, let us not look back. The past is gone. And she says, see, even with this symbol, I can take it off my bosom and I can be free to be a new person as well. And she takes the scarlet letter off, this could be a quiz question, and throws it into the forest, almost into the water, but not into the water. It's along the edge of the stream. And with the stigma gone, she also feels incredibly free. Oh, what a relief, she says. By another impulse, she takes off the formal cap that confined her hair, and then her hair falls down around her, and she's beautiful. Her sex, her youth, the whole richness of her beauty came back. They're like a young couple again. All at once, as with a sudden smile of heaven, forth bursts the sunshine, pouring a very flood into the obscure forest, gladdening each green leaf. And so again, nature is mirroring the two of them. Such was the sympathy of nature, capital letter, that wild heathen nature of the forest, never subjugated by human law or illumined by higher truth, with the bliss of these two spirits. Love, whether newly born or aroused from a death-like slumber, must always create a sunshine, filling the heart so full of radiance that it overflows upon the outward world. So love heals sin. Love is good regardless. It is never bad. That's what this is saying. Then Hester has another joy, and she says, oh, you have to meet Pearl, our child. You have to get to know her. And he's nervous. He says, do you think she'll be glad to know me? I have even been a little afraid of her. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Pearl's a little unpredictable, and I think sometimes Hester's a little afraid of her too. And she said, that's sad, but she will love thee dearly, and thou her. She's not far off. I'll call her. And the minister says he sees her, and of course the sunshine is on her too. And so he does believe that, maybe she will love him, and he thinks about that. The ray quivered to and fro, making her figure dim or distant, now like a real child, now like a child spirit. Remember, she kind of is a little bit of, a real child and something else, a symbol of the scarlet letter itself, the embodiment of the sin, but also a wild and unpredictable, free child in many ways. And it does describe here, this is another long description of nature, of how Pearl has been spending the hour in the forest, and how even though the forest might seem scary, it's always been her playmate. And while she's playing, like a partridge comes out to see her, and a pigeon, and a squirrel chatters at her, and a fox comes by. It even says, so the story goes, Hawthorne says, that a wolf maybe even came up and smelled her clothing. No, I don't think that happened. The truth seems to be, however, that the mother forest and these wild things which it nourished all recognized a kindred wilderness in the human child. And she was gentler here than she was at home, so she was not as naughty. She behaves herself. I mean, how many mothers would send their 7-year-old into the forest or to play along the water and not worry about her? Pearl is completely well behaved in the forest. So Pearl gathered the violets, the anemones, the columbines, the twigs of the freshest green, which the old trees held down before her. With these she decorated her hair and her young waist and became a nymph child, a product of nature, or an infant dryad, or whatever else was in closest sympathy with the antique wood. In such guise had Pearl adorned herself when she heard her mother's voice and came slowly back because she sees the clergyman.